We are here with Jim Shane, and of course, Thaddeus and I, to talk about the core method. And this is a method that Jim has developed that is about emotional release and balancing out your life, getting control of things, manifesting properly, and all of the good stuff. And Jim is a dear friend of mine I've known for probably 15 years, 16 years, something like that. So I just love how excited he gets when he talks about this and how much he loves seeing people have these little wins and these changes in their lives. So I'm going to ask Jim to talk about his how, like, how did you first get into energy and all of this? Like, what was what pulled you into this and led you down this path?
Hi. Yeah, I'm Jim, and I'm going to have to say, in all honesty, for me, and I'm not going to do the long story or anything, but this started for me back in probably 1962. I would turn 13 years old in August of that year. It was summertime, school was out. I was with my buddy. He needed to run an errand for his mom at the Mesa Public Library, where I live here in Mesa. And I went along because we were on our bikes and we were just a couple of kids, 12 years old, going to the library. And he's up at the front desk taking care of the business, and I'm just wandering around the shelves. And well, it's a library and it's books. And I'm 12 years old and school is out and reading is the last thing on my mind. I'm just waiting for him to get done. And I'm just cruising along and everything's just kind of this mind-numbing beige. And all of a sudden, this one book right here catches my attention. It's bright yellow. It's got bold red and black letters on it. And it says TNT, the power within you. And I looked at that and really? So I pulled that book down off the shelf and I looked at the cover, the power. Okay, so I opened up, I looked at the contents, went forward, read a paragraph here, a couple more paragraphs. I closed that book, took it to my buddy and said, check this out for me. I want to read it. And he did, and I did in about 3 days.
Nice.
And that was the beginning of my exposure to self-help and psychology and the human condition. And from there, probably 98% of anything that I read or studied had to do with people. And a lot of it had to do with the fact that I was learning about myself and why I was the way I was. But I intuitively also knew that I was learning about other people. And so it kind of became this thing for me to learn how we can improve in our lives. Many years later, I'm sure people are aware of multi-level marketing and Amway, etc. And back in the early 80s, I got involved. And of course, they have this Tape of the Month Club. And I got the one tape because they have the big stars, the diamonds and all that. They get and speak in front of these big crowds and they record it and they put it on cassette tape so you can listen to what they said to get you all excited and pumped up and go out there and sell that soap or whatever it is. Well, one of those tapes had a very profound effect on me. The name of the tape was The Peoples. And the gist of the tape, as that guy spoke to that audience and very, very emotional, was the peoples. Will they be better because you came?
Nice.
And it still affects me when I think of
that's a good one, huh? I love that.
Will the people be any better off because I spent time on God's green earth?
Yeah.
And that became like an anthem, a kind of a hidden secret anthem for me, was somehow I'm going to do something that's going to make a difference in other people's lives.
I love
and
that.
eventually that's what has happened.
You set an intention on that early, huh?
Yeah, I did. Back in the early 80s, probably about 1980, in fact, is when I heard that tape. And listening to that guy just brought me to tears in my desire to somehow find a way to make a difference in other people's lives. So along the way, one of the things that I was able to do or discover about myself is that I'm a really good listener. When I sit and listen to someone talk, it makes them feel like I actually care. Well, I really do. That's why they feel that way. And so I honestly have cards and letters from people thanking me for just being willing to just listen to them, because they had this and that and the other going on in their lives, and they needed someone to talk to. And I just ended up being that kind of person for them. And so that was important. And that recognition also was something that moved me forward. And then finally in 1998, or actually in 19, about 88, I discovered, I was living in San Diego, and I discovered thought field therapy. I actually got to spend an evening with Dr. Roger Callahan in his high-rise office downtown San Diego, because I was living in San Diego at the time, and I was exposed to thought field therapy, but I didn't quite get it. I didn't quite get it. Well, this is a funny story. About 10 years later, I'm working at a cabinet shop, because I did a lot of woodworking and cabinetry as a career. And there's this particular radio station. It's an alternative radio station. They talk about weird stuff. And one day I'm working and I put the headset on and I'm listening, and I come in the middle of it, and this guy's talking about this thing, and it's a tapping thing. And I go, wait a minute, I'm familiar with this. What is this? And he starts mentioning it. He thought field therapy. Go, oh, this is it. This is what I was trying to get 10 years ago with Callahan. And come to find out, this guy's written the book, Freedom from Fear Forever, by Dr. Durlacher. And he works in an office about 20 minutes from where I work. So at the end of the day, I raced over there. I met him, bought the book, got him to sign it. And I took that book and I started reading it. I wanted to get just the part, what's the part that makes the difference? How do you change people? How do I change myself? Well, funny thing is, for about 6 months up to that point, I had been suffering from cold on my teeth. You know how
sensitivity,
ice cream, any cold causes that excruciating pain? I would avoid eating on one side anything cold. Well, here I am at work. It's lunchtime. I'm alone. And I've got the book open and I've been reading it, and I'm going through just the process of how to change things. But during the reading of the book, I'm finding that it's not only emotional things, but some physical things can be affected by this process. I thought, wow, that's interesting. Excuse me. And I'm sitting there with a cold cut sandwich and a cold drink for lunch, reading this book, and it's explaining how to do this. And I thought, I wonder. I got real curious, and I thought, well, it's been really excruciating over here. It's been very painful for anything over. So I'm eating over here all the time. And this sandwich has got the cold tomato, the lettuce, the cold cut, etc. And I thought, I wonder, So I make sure I understand the process. Then I set the book down and I put the sandwich down, and I went through the process real quick. And just to make sure, I went through it a second time. Then I picked up the sandwich. This actually happened to me. I took a bite, but I was a little nervous about going over there and just starting to chew over there, because I knew how painful it was. But I did a little bit and I didn't feel anything. And I went ahead and finished it off. And I thought, well, that was interesting. So I decided to be brave and just go ahead and take a big old chomp right out of the middle of that sandwich with all that cold stuff in there. I just took that big old bite and I just put it over there and I just started chewing. And there was nothing. No pain whatsoever. Nice. It was gone. And I was sitting there just absolutely dumbfounded. And to me, I just thought, I've discovered voodoo. This stuff works. And that right there sold me right on the spot. Well, that was about 1998. Then I found out that thought field therapy also was responsible for emotional freedom techniques coming out, EFT. Then I discovered Gary Craig, and I discovered that he had a whole set of tapes for $300, video cassette tapes teaching EFT. And I thought, I got to have that. So I bought the tapes, I went through them, I learned it, and I got really good at it. And I started sharing it with people. I actually taught several classes in it, used it on myself. I was changing things about myself, about other people, and it grew from there. In 1998, I also discovered Dr. Brad May in San Diego. He had a thing called emotional complex clearing. which to me was very interesting because he had a very different way of releasing emotions. So I went to I was living in Arizona at the time. I went back to San Diego where he was at, went through his training, and the emotional release was him taking you through a guided meditation while at the same time stroking down the back of the spine with the fingertips like this. And I thought, well, that's really interesting. So there's that first time I encountered this stroking down the spine. Several years later, I discovered Dr. Brad Nelson, and he strokes down the spine to release the emotions. A few years later, I discover Paul Wong, who teaches a thing called the art of neutrality, where he takes his awareness and he puts it in the center and moves it up the center of the body. And so I start wondering, what is it about this center of the body and the spine and so on? So I start looking very closely at that. And as I research into that, I discover there are 4 very sensitive systems built into the spine. So we have our upper section, which is our rib cage, our arms, our head, neck, and everything. And we have our lower section, which is our hips, our thighs, our lower legs, our feet. But what connects those 2 parts together is the spine. And what I discovered is that the spine is a communication device. It not only holds us up, but there's 4 systems in there. The first one is the chakra system. Now you see those pictures of people sitting in a cross-legged position and all those little colored spots that goes up the front. But rarely do you see the picture turned to the side. Those little wheels look like little tornadoes, and the small end connects into the spine. Each chakra is associated with a color, with certain emotions, and with certain organs of the body. So there's a communication going on between the energy that comes in and what's going on inside the body, and that information is being sent to the brain or our consciousness. The second system is the governing meridian of Chinese acupuncture. That is like in the mountains, there's streams and brooks and creeks all running down the mountains, and they all join together in a main river. Well, our bodies are like that. All the energy meridians that flow through our body, that come through from the extremities, our feet, our legs, our arms, our hands, and they join together in what's called the governing meridian. Starts at the upper lip, goes up over the head and down the spine to the tailbone. That's the large circulation. The small one, of course, goes from the tailbone up the front to the bottom of the lip. So all this information about the body is being gathered together, and it's going right up over the head and down the spine again. That's 2. The third one is the vagus nerve. The vagus nerve connects into the brain, and it's actually 2 nerves. It's not just one. And they run side by side down the spine, and they branch out and they connect into the different organs of the body, and they have to do with our moods and our state of being and our attitudes and so on. So there's that information being transmitted to the brain, our consciousness. And the fourth one is, of course, the central nervous system connects into the brain, travels down through the spine, branches out, and brings sensitivity to all parts of the body. Now, I like to ask people 3 questions. If you're in a place, let's see, let's put it this way. Have you ever been in a place where you felt uncomfortable? Like you didn't like being there? You ever felt that way?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Have you ever been around someone that made you feel uncomfortable? Like they just weren't the vibe just didn't match. Okay. For whatever reason, okay. And the third question is, have you ever felt like you were being watched? Many people have had that experience. The reason we have those feelings is because the antenna, as I call it, the antenna of our life is our spine with those 4 sensitive systems built right into it. It's sensitive not only to our internal environment, notifying our consciousness of what's going on in here, but it's also sensitive to our external environment. And information from that can be brought in. and sent to the consciousness. So we're aware of what's going on around us. Like, is there a tiger in the bushes over there? Someone's watching me. Is it not safe to go into that building? Things like that. So we have that. It's built into our bodies, and it's automatic. Our spine is the one part of the core method. The other part of it is our conscious awareness. Now, you get the feeling someone's watching you because your antenna of your life, your spine, all that stuff going on in there is sensitive to the environment. Well, it's also sensitive to your own awareness. When you direct your own awareness into your center at your spine responds to that awareness just like it does to everything else in your environment. Mm-hmm. The difference is that it's your awareness and it's carrying an intention. And intention is very powerful when it comes to working with energy. And that's what you're working with, is the energy of your environment, your external and internal environment, and being aware of it and making decisions about how you will conduct yourself concerning where you are, who you're with, or the state of your body. So your intention in the core method is to heal, is to release emotions. So when you put those two together, your awareness and your spine, or the antenna of your life, that causes a change in how you feel. So I'm going to let you ask another question, because I need to know what direction to go.
I love it, because it makes so much sense to me. And like, you're talking about our spidey senses, our awareness, and right, the little tinglies, like that's something, the intuition and those messages, our body is always talking to us, and learning to listen to it is a huge journey for a lot of people. That, like, what do you mean my body's talking to me? Like those feelings, I get goosebumps a lot. Like I get that little validation, or like whatever it is. I get little messages and, like weird things, like today I was making my coffee and I heard put cinnamon in it. And I'm like, okay, just get these little thoughts. And I put cinnamon and MCT oil, and I'm like, damn, that's good. Like that's what my body asked for, which I don't put cinnamon in my coffee really ever. But, so people being aware of their own messages is kind of a huge thing. And we're talking about, how we cope, and we like say no, or we just kind of ignore that. And when something comes up that wants attention, we have a tendency to kind of say no to it, and then just put a band-aid on it and cope with it, instead of asking, oh, what do you need? So that right, is probably the next conversation is how do you become aware that you're coping with your life, instead of being willing to ask those questions and go into those healing moments where you actually ask, like, well, what is that? What do I need? And what tools do I have? So how do you know that you're coping? How do you figure that out?
When certain emotions, actually many of them, when certain painful emotions, like for instance, you're driving along, the day is beautiful, sky's blue, the temperature's just right, and then that one song comes on the radio, and suddenly you're in tears and like that, because that song took you back to that time and that person or those people and all that happened and how you felt, and all of that's been stored in here and just waiting for something to bring it to the surface, because it wants out. But you have to give it permission. And when you don't have an effective way to let it out, then you cope. You don't know what else to do. You try to distract yourself. You try to think of something else, or you just cry. You act out or whatever. But that doesn't solve it. That doesn't release it. It's still stuck.
Yeah.
And the idea is, the way to overcome that is to become aware that this is a problem and look for a way to let go of those emotions. In other words, you have to give them permission to leave. It's like I describe in my book, the computer analogy.
Mhm.
When you have a virus in your computer and you want it out of your computer, you have to click delete. And what pops up? A little box. And in that box, it says, are you sure you want to delete this? Well, you have to make a choice, either yes or no. Well, if you click no, the virus stays in your computer and you still have to deal with it. Well, coping is like saying no.
Mm.
You cope with it. And then, like you say, it just puts a Band-Aid on it, or it distracts you from it, or whatever. Just go away. Don't bother me. I don't want to have to feel you.
Mm.
So it just goes back down inside, is okay until the next time. And
So
it just waits.
that's kind of
Because
like, yeah, when that song comes on and it brings up that emotion, and you know that that's attached to something, but it's not a happy memory. It's just a heavy
no,
emotion. And if
right.
you're like, okay, I don't want to feel that every time I hear this song, and your subconscious says, are you sure? And you're like, no, I kind of like suffering a little bit. Well, we'll just leave it. It's cool. So every time it
Well,
comes up in your life,
there's something to that, though.
yes.
When we, well, it's called our comfort zone. The
Yeah,
familiar is what's comfortable.
right.
And if hurting constantly is what's familiar, that's your comfort zone, because you're familiar with how you deal with it, your
Mhm.
particular coping mechanisms. And that's an environment that we create inside of ourselves that causes us to cope, to push back, to resist, fight against our emotions. And when we do that, we just shove it back down and it will come back up again. And the
Mhm.
reason is because, excuse me, the engine is running on all of our emotions all the time, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And all it takes is the right stimulus for one of those to come to the surface to say, me, can you let me out now? But when
Yeah.
we don't know how to let it out, then we fight against it. We resist it. We push it back. We try to bury it. We act out. And so we have all these coping mechanisms like eating, sex, TV, video games, shopping, spending money. There's all these different things that we do to distract ourselves from the emotions that we don't want to feel, so that we can feel something that we do want to feel. We want to feel good.
So we
Well,
want to feel good,
right.
but
We want to feel good.
can we have feeling good?
Yeah, right, right. We
What?
want to feel good. But is it okay to feel good? And
Yeah.
sometimes there's parts of us inside that say, no, 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 we don't deserve to feel good. And so there's the hidden qualifiers. Do I deserve it? That one is, let me get down here.
About
Okay,
fairness, you told me.
that's yeah. The do I deserve it is about fairness. Have I paid the price for it? Have I suffered enough for it? Have I given up enough for it?
Hmm.
Have I sacrificed enough for it? Did I take it or steal it from someone? You know, things like that. Do I deserve it? It's a fairness issue. You know, like when someone cuts in line in front of you. Hey, that's not fair. You
Mm.
know. The second one, there's three of them. That's the first one. The second one is, am I worthy of it?
Mm-hmm.
You know, this, and a lot of this has to do with our desires, things that we want to manifest into our lives. You might look at it that way, or maybe things we're trying to avoid so we have a better life. The second one is, am I worthy of it? Being worthy is a morals issue. Is it morally right for me to have it?
Mm.
Things like, am I spiritually clean enough? Am I pure enough? Am I of the right character? Am I righteous enough to have it? Have I confessed my sins? Have I cleansed myself of my sins? A lot of people who are involved in religion have this one weighing heavily on them constantly. Uh, uh, am I worthy of it? And many times the answer is no. And that comes from the stuff that we have stored inside of us. It says, no, 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 remember that thing you did? You know, remember those people that you hurt? Remember that? You know, and that part of us keeps track, that part of our subconscious mind that records everything in our lives. And that is our conscience. and it says morally, no, you don't deserve that.
Mm.
You don't get to have that. That's the second one. The third one is, do I have a right to it? Having the right to something is a rules issue. Things like, is it honorable for me to have it? Is it justified? Do I have a legitimate claim to it? Did you bend the rules in your favor? Did you take advantage somehow that other people don't have? Things like that. If you don't have the right to something, maybe something inside of you will say, no, you don't deserve it. You're not worthy of it because you did this and that. So you have no right to assume that you can't just say, I'm a doctor or a lawyer, because you never spent the time and the money to get educated. You can claim it, you can say it, but it's not true. You have no right to say that. You have, etc. So those three: do I deserve it? Am I worthy of it? Do I have a right to it? And those are hidden qualifiers that we hold ourselves to as we go along in our lives, and we have desires for things that we want. So the connection between those is that wanting and having are the two states.
So are those three qualifiers like between wanting and having? Is that kind of where what those are about? Are those kind of like the interrupter?
Yeah, you need to get those on your side. You need to get those with you so that you can switch from wanting to having.
Okay, so you would say like I do deserve this, I am worthy, and I do have a right to it. So I think it might be helpful now if you have a story. I know you've worked with a lot of people. If you have a story of someone anonymously, of course, like just a story of someone who went from wanting to having that you've worked with. Do you have a example, maybe?
Wanting, well, one of the funny stories that pops into my mind is I was on my way to San Diego from Arizona, and while I was in Yuma getting gas, this message popped up, and this young lady said, "You wouldn't believe what just happened to me." And she says, "I just got the worst news possible, and it sent me into a total tailspin. I was like, on a scale of 1 to 10, I was at a 20 in distress, and I was pacing around the house trying to distract myself from it and everything." And she says, and then suddenly I remembered the core method. And she says, funny how things that fly out the window under stress. And she thought that was pretty interesting. But anyway, she used the method, and in a matter of 5 seconds, she went from a 20 down to a 2.
Oh my gosh. So
And
that's awesome.
and she said that just blew her mind, and she had to message me to tell me what just happened to her. And then she found out later on, about 2 hours later, that the thing that was supposed to have happened was a non-problem. It didn't actually happen that way.
Oh, wow.
And so it was but we want to feel good. We want to avoid feeling bad. So we do what we can to do that. When it comes to things like jobs, cars, houses, vacation, the things that we want, let's see.
You got a story about a car, I think. Your own story about your car that you had tested.
I've done it many times with cars.
I love your car story.
Let's see. The best one was when I bought my Camaro.
I think that was it. Yeah.
Yeah, that one there. I had heard a story years before where a guy saw a magazine. On the front of the car magazine, there was this particular Maserati, and he just fell in love with that, and he decided he was going to get him one of those. So he took that picture off the front of the magazine, put it on his refrigerator, and every day he would walk by that picture and he'd look at that, and he would pat that picture and he would say, "That's my car. That's my car." So there was an actual physical something going on there, which impressed me. So years later, a particular body style of a car came out, and I decided, I'm going to do what that guy did, because I didn't know if it was a true story or not, but it impressed me. So I decided to try it. So I went down to the dealer, and I got brochures that had pictures of the car that I wanted. And I cut them out, and I put them in several places, at work, at home, And I would do the same thing. I would just look up and I would touch those pictures. That's my car. That's my car. And in about 3 months, I had the car. But the interesting thing is that I had imagined a red one. When I finally got the car, it was a dark blue metallic. And as I was taking the pictures down, I realized what had happened. The pictures that I put up were the dark blue metallic because they didn't have any pictures of a red one. And so it was so specific that the pictures that I was touching matched what I actually ended up manifesting for myself. And so
That's amazing.
I've done that, or like when I got my my 1970 Duster. I was driving a beat up old 63 Chevy Nova. And one night I remember I was thinking so much about having a fast car with a 4-speed that my 63 Chevy Nova was a 6-cylinder with a 3-speed on the column. I actually reached down for the 4-speed to downshift when I came to a light, and I pulled my hand back like, well, that was weird, because I was in it so much. Well, a few months later, I had a fast car with a 4-speed. I got a brand new 1970 Duster with a V8 and a 4-speed, which was very quick. And it's just putting yourself into the state. So you go out of the state of wanting it and you put yourself into the state of having it. Now, an interesting thing about wanting and having is you want something, you feel the desire for it, but that just sends the message that you don't have it. And all that desire does is convince your subconscious mind that you don't have it, so you get more of wanting. That's what you're doing, is you're feeling wanting, so you get more of that. What you want to do is you want to switch over into the state of having, because the having state is ownership. Wanting is desire. Wanting is empty. It's not having, it's lack. Having is a state of fulfillment, connection, completion, ownership, like I say.
Let's use that the analogy you brought up, like shopping on Amazon. I think it's pretty relatable for a lot of people. When you're shopping online for something and you look at it, you're like, ooh, that's cool, that's cool. But if you don't put it in your cart, you don't really want it. It's kind of there. But if you see something you really want and you put it in your cart, like that was like a really relevant way to explain this. You know, if you see a picture of it online and then actually place your order. The way you explain that, I really like that. So to explain
that whole idea of placing your order, your state of being is desire when you want that thing. So you go on Amazon and you look for it and you find it and you go, oh, and you read all about it. You read all the reviews and everything, and you're getting all this information and you're building your desire for it, but you don't have it. So there's no ownership yet. It's just desire. So you decide you're going to have it. So you make some clicks, you go to the order page and you click submit your order. Once you do that, your state changes from desire to ownership. Now Amazon owes you because you paid the price. And how you paid the price on Amazon is to submit a certain amount of money, and there's an exchange, and now Amazon owes you. So now it's going to be shipped to you. They're going to take care of how it gets to you. They're going to take care of how long it takes to get to you, because they got to go through their channels. Neither of those two are your job. Your job is to decide what you want and submit your order. Once you've submitted your order, your state changes from wanting to having, and now you're in that state of ownership, and expectation is it's going to show up. That's all there is to it. It'll show up, I'll have it because I paid the price. Well, that's on physical things. On emotional things or manifesting and so on, the price you pay is giving up or letting go of wanting, because wanting is lack. You let go of wanting so that you can come into the state of having, because those are the only two states. Now, there is a state in between. It's called neutrality. And like I explained to people, that would refer to things that are not really that important. Like, for instance, for me, climbing Mount Everest to the top is just not something I want to do. So that's neutral. That doesn't matter. But being able to pay my rent or keep my car running or afford a meal or whatever, those are things that are important to me. When I want them, I do what it takes to get them, then I have them. And the interesting thing about wanting and having, they don't know each other. They've never met, because as soon as having shows up, wanting disappears. Now you're in the state of having or ownership.
Hmm.
So the idea is to release or let go of wanting. That's how you pay the price with the universe. You put yourself in the state of having. That's the magical state. That's the state that attracts, that pulls the stuff in. The state of ownership, the state of having, that congruent state that says the mind and the heart, or the conscious and subconscious minds, are now together on this thing. And now the energy is pulling that thing into you. So now it's just a matter of time. How it gets to you is not your job. When it gets to you is not your job. Just know that now you own it. Be in the state of having. That's the state that attracts, or the magical state.
Yeah, and the obviously when somebody says to me like, how do I get peace? And my answer is usually something like, you have to let go of everything that is not peace to have peace.
Right. Exactly.
So when we're in a human being state and we have interruptions, like the things that are not peace, the method talks about wanting those three things: the control, approval, and safety. And that one, I think when you first shared this with me and I understood that, like, that the space between wanting and having is wanting control, approval, or safety. And that piece is really powerful to me, because no matter what it is that you have interrupting your peace, there's some part of it that wants control, approval, and safety. And this is where, so, people who don't know you in this method, it's like, well, what is it? We'll give you all that, and we'll give you his website and the videos, and you can learn it. But the foundation of it is clearing the emotion that is in the way of having. So when he's talking about wanting versus having, like when you're in a wanting state, it's because you've got stuff in the way. You don't have what you want because you don't have it yet, because you're still in a space of wanting control, approval, or safety. And those three things, from everything I've learned from you with this, and every time I've used your method, when you can understand that no matter what it is, it's going to come back to one of those three things. So if someone, I don't know, maybe you have the story of the lady who dropped her panic from 20 panic down to 2, like, do you have a story about that, like a case study, I guess, with that wanting control, approval, or safety, that you can identify, like an example of what that looks like?
I actually have several testimonials on my website.
Cool.
Yeah, there's a testimonial link there that goes down the list. There's quite a few testimonials. One that comes to my mind is I was at an event. There was a young lady there that was talking to people and so on. I'd never seen her before, and we ended up sitting down and talking. And as I talked to her, I got into this kind of stuff with her, and she started to tear up, and she had to excuse herself, and she left. And I thought, wow, what happened? So I'm over here walking, and then I turn around and I come back towards the main group, and here she comes walking towards me, and she's apologetic, and she wants to explain why. She was wearing black, and she said the reason she wears black is because she cannot stand color against her skin. And the reason is because she had a very traumatic experience with a guy one night who trapped her in his house and raped her several times. And that made her afraid of men. That made her feel ugly inside. There was a lot of trauma, PTSD. And when I started talking about all these positive things, what she was feeling was a desire to feel that good, but she couldn't allow herself to feel that good. And that conflict made her cry. And I'm sorry, I feel emotion when I think about this kind of thing, because it's important to me. It's valuable to me and others to be able to be released from that kind of pain.
Mhm.
So after a short while, I convinced her to meet with me, and we used the method to clear all those thoughts and feelings about what happened that night. And it was effective enough that in a short while, she was wearing the colors again. She met somebody. She got married. She had a kid. Last I heard, she lives down in southern Arizona somewhere. She was going to school to learn how to become a female mechanic because she was interested in those kinds of things. And she wanted to be able to teach other women how to be able to take care of themselves. She felt empowered. She
Nice.
owned life again. And she was happy with who she was. To be able to let go of that kind of trauma and PTSD, she got her life back.
Yeah, what
And
was between her and peace was that trauma. And I think
right,
the word trauma is, you hear it a lot more these days. But I think what we don't understand is it's not always giant big trauma. Like obviously being raped is a very big trauma, but sometimes it's a lot of little pieces. So when you have an emotion that you're triggered and you feel something, like it may not be something you even expected was in your way, but when you can clear out even the little things, they add up to the big change. So I love hearing that because of the freedom you were able to help her find by helping her release that. It's amazing.
and what you're talking about, all those little things, as we live our lives, little things happen.
Mhm.
And a lot of those are things that we disagree with, we have resistance to, aversion, disapproval, all that kind of stuff. And when we don't do anything about it, they accumulate. And all of that goes inside and is stored in our subconscious mind as reasons why we feel the way we do in our bodies and in our lives. All that stuff accumulates and all that stuff has to do with whether we deserve something, whether we're worthy of something, whether we have a right to something. All of that affects it's all connected. We're such complex creatures. You wouldn't believe.
You really are. It's amazing too when you set an intention at a young age, like I want to leave the world better than I found it, and that's like probably the most honorable human intention we can have is to make an impact and leave the world and people better than we found them, and creating a method that you can share with people. And like I said, I've known you for a long time, and you're the kind of person who wants to hand someone the toolbox and then let them, learn it and use it for themselves and remember to use it. And I think we can all be guilty of like not using our tools.
Right, right. It's a
So
habit. If we don't have the habit of using the tool, we'll forget and we'll go back to our old ways, our old habitual ways, which for most people is coping.
right. And we've
And
talked,
so
Thaddeus and I have
we end up
talked
stuck.
about this. Yeah. Thaddeus and I have talked about this a lot, where he can go to the yoga mat and do that, but he has to go to the yoga mat and do that. You can't just like think it away or like go do
Right.
something else. And you have to create that space for yourself. And whether it's yoga or the core method or whatever works for you, like my biggest intention with sharing these things is some people are going to hear the core method and they might not be able to feel that energy in their body yet. A lot of people aren't connected enough to feel it, but the ones that do, it's almost instant how fast this method works. And I've seen that a lot of times. It's cool.
Yeah, it actually does work very quickly. In fact, that was one of my criteria. I had a couple of criteria when I was designing this whole thing. It was a process from 1998 until 2015 when I had gone through enough experiences and learned enough different methods and protocols and modalities and so on until I finally had enough information. And I just kind of stood back and I looked at the whole thing. And like Gary Craig did with EFT, when he took it from thought field therapy and simplified it so everybody could have it, I looked at all this stuff and I thought, I like that part, I like that part, I like that part. I don't want those things. I like that and that. And I just put those parts together And the criteria is I wanted it to be very simple to do. I wanted it to be easy to learn. I wanted it to be covert. That means something you do on the inside instead of all this tapping and everything, going like this. If you're out in public and you got something bothering you, you're going to do this here? No, people, you don't want people looking at you weird. That's right, exactly. I wanted it to be something covert, not overt, so that you could do it. You could be, with the core method, you could be standing in line at the grocery store doing, therapy on yourself, and nobody would know the difference because you're releasing stuff right there on the spot, and it had to be quick.
Mhm.
You can do the core method in 6 seconds or less. When you have an emotion stuck inside of you and you realize it and you decide you're going to release it and you use the core method to do it, you can do it in about 6 seconds. That's how quick it works.
Yep.
And one of the other criteria is that I didn't want to be the deal in people's lives necessarily. I wanted people to be empowered to become autonomous so that they could have a tool that would make it possible for them to heal their own lives and not have to wait for, an appointment with me to be able to take care of that thing. They can look at it, they can tell what the emotions are, release the emotions, and see. That's an important point right there. When you feel an emotion, and the reason you feel it is because something is missing and you want it back. When things are not going right, you've lost control. When you feel embarrassed or have been rejected by somebody, you want approval. You lost approval. You want it back. When you're in a place where you don't feel comfortable, you don't feel like it's safe to be there, you've lost safety. You want it back. Those are the 3 things we want more than anything else in the world. We want control, approval, and safety. Well, all those other emotions all drop down below that. They're all listed underneath those 3. So when you feel a negative emotion, it reminds you, when you have a tool to use that you can use to release the emotion, the idea is to begin to develop the habit of turning to the tool rather than the old habitual ways of coping, because coping is how you get stuck. Releasing is how you get free.
Mhm.
So when you have a tool, you know that you can release it. So it makes it easier to pay attention to your emotions instead of avoiding them. You want them to come up because that's the one that's saying, whatever comes up, that's the one that's saying, can I go now? Will you let me go now? And you have to click yes. And so you use the method and it releases the emotion.
I want to ask you a question about that. I worked with a lady, this was a long time ago, but she said something to me that was really, it really changed my perspective on emotion, because we typically want to release emotions that we consider negative. But she talked about you want to soften the emotional charge on all of your emotions. So say that song comes on and you have a really happy memory and that's in your body. From her perspective, she's like, let that go too, because it creates more space for presence. And I was like, well, but I like that memory. I'm attached to that. I really like thinking about that. And it was a totally unique way to look at that, how much we like our happy memories and our happy associations, but our negative emotions are different. Like we want those to go away. But her take on it was let it all go. Like clear it all and then have new experiences. Like, of course, when you hear that song, you'll have a happy memory, but it won't have that strong charge. So her perspective was any heavy emotion, whether it's positive, negative, whatever, like anything that has a big charge to you, to let all of it go. So how does the method work if you have like a happy feeling that's like, I really attached to that moment of, when I got my puppy, like just something silly, and you're like, whatever, but you have that like that memory of that in your body. Like what's your perspective on that?
The first thing that comes to my mind is a question that you can ask yourself about a positive feeling or a positive emotion. And the question is, could I let this go and see if it gets any better?
Nice.
If you look for the advantage, if you look for the bump up, it'll be there.
Mm-hmm.
Could I let this go and see if it gets any better? And if you answer yes, allow yourself to feel the sensation of, or at least the intention of, letting go of that great feeling, expecting that an even better feeling is going to take its place.
Mhm.
Then, could I let this one go and see if it gets any better? And let it bump up again. And could I let this one go and see if it gets any better? Because you're on a roll now.
Yeah,
And allow that good feeling to enlarge, to expand, to maybe include parts of your life that you never thought that one feeling could include.
mm,
And it makes everything start to shine.
I love it. I think that's it. So I think we're going to spend a few more minutes here because Jim's showing up in some Facebook groups, and they're fascinating to me. Reality Revolution and International and Transurfing. What's it called?
Transurfing. Yeah.
Transurfing community. So these are groups with people who do different types of energy work, and he likes to show up there and respond to people, just as kind of his own enjoyment, helping people that way. So what is the I think you were talking about the transurfing, like what's the gist of that one?
Vadim Zeland is a guy in Russia who wrote the book. Apparently this information was channeled, but I don't know exactly where it all came from. The book has 5 parts. It's some 600 or 765 pages long or something like that. That was way too much for me. I had already had my method anyway, but the the idea behind reality transurfing, there are several different techniques that are taught in there, like pendulums. A pendulum swings, but in reality transurfing, a pendulum is an energy entity that attracts more people to enlarge itself, to gain more strength.
Hmm.
For example, a football team or a political party or your religion. There's all kinds of things that can be pendulums that attract more people, want to be stronger, and they tend to control a part of your life, if not all of your life. And the idea is to be able to recognize pendulums and to decide consciously if you want to be a part of that pendulum, if you want to follow the pendulum, you want to adhere to the rules of the pendulum, if you want to live a life that that pendulum lays out for you, or if you want to disconnect from that pendulum because you don't want it to control you anymore, because like alcohol is a pendulum, smoking is a pendulum. It tends to attract you into it, and it begins to take over part of your life. And you want to be able to let things like that go. So that's one small part of reality transurfing. Another part that's really a big one for people is what's called excess potential or importance. Same thing. This is when you have a strong desire for something, but maybe you have too strong of a desire. And that desire is getting in the way. Like, for instance, you're going for an interview for a really job charming. The best job you could possibly imagine for yourself. Everything is perfect about it. You really want this job, and you are scared to death that you're going to fail the interview and not get the job. That's excess potential.
Hmm.
That's important. And you want to drop that importance. So as they say in reality transurfing, drop importance. In other words, come down to a state of ownership. Just let yourself feel into it and be in that place where you own that thing now, rather than, I got to have it. I hope I don't lose it. I hope it doesn't, slip out of my fingers. I hope they don't say no. All that's excess potential. So a lot of people come onto the reality transurfing group and ask, how do I drop importance on this thing? And I look around and I go, well, you could use the core method. That's what the core method does, is it helps you drop importance.
Yeah, drop
Because
importance.
excess potential, importance gets in the way. It messes things up. It causes you to stumble. It causes you to attract the problem, to perpetuate the problem, etc.
So it's
So
the same thing you were saying with wanting and having, like wanting the job and going in with wanting and worry and those emotions versus like, if this job is for me, this will be easy and I can be at peace and be centered and go and show up and be who I am, and if it's right, it'll work. And if it's not right, it's not for me, and just being at peace with that. So if I
mhm,
have an emotion of fear of I'm not going to get this job, I can use the core method to find where that's sitting, where my I'm not worthy of this job is sitting, and go, I don't need that. Get rid of it,
right.
and then
You
feel better about it.
let go of that excess potential, that importance.
Yeah.
Um, it eliminates fear, anger, shame, guilt, which is also interesting because now we're getting into karma. People talk about karma, and this is probably a ticklish, a skittish area for people because people have certain ideas about what karma is and where it's held and who's in control of it. And the thing is that people sometimes have the idea that they don't have the authority to release themselves from their karma. They think that that's the authority of someone else,
Hmm.
and that we must submit to our karma no matter what. Well, the fact is, our karma is stored inside of us, and we have access to all of our karma. And when you just decide to let go of the karma on a situation, a thing, or whatever has happened, you can use the core method to do that because every thought generates an emotion.
Mm-hmm.
When you think about the thing that you felt like you've got some karma about, you've done something to hurt someone, and the energies were not balanced, and there's really no way to balance them now. It's past, it's over, or whatever has happened. You can balance your own karma by thinking about that thing. How does it feel? And that's the whole idea behind the core method is you think about what happened, and you feel the emotion. What happened is the story. That's the two parts of a problem. Problems all have two parts. There's the story, and there's the emotion the story generates. When you use the core method, you remember the story, you know what happened. The story is recorded in memory. It has a beginning, middle, and end. Unless you're in the midst of it, it has a beginning and a middle. It doesn't have an end yet, but you can use the method to help you along with it. But most stories in our lives have a beginning, middle, and end. It's recorded in memory. It'll always be there. You can't make the story go away. But the emotion that the story generates, well, that's just so much energy churning around inside of the body. And that energy is amendable to the proper tool. And well, the core method is a proper tool. There are many. Mine's not the only one, but there's a really good one.
I agree, it's a really good one. And I think on that point, the idea of blame and ownership is really big, because when you realize that your story, you have a part in that story, and whether or not there's anyone else, any emotion you're holding on to, or you're saying they did this to me on any level, that's something that you can't change the story, but you can change your emotions around it. So even if you've
Right.
got a story that didn't end well and it keeps bothering you and it keeps coming up, this is
Mhm.
one way to again soften and clear that emotion around it, so your story can just be a story and be put on the shelf, instead of every time you think of it, it comes up and it makes you angry or frustrated or resentful, or
Or it makes you
just,
cry.
or you're sad, like any emotion. Yeah. But I think what we often as humans forget is that we can't change anybody else, and our own experience is up to us, and we can only change how we experience our own life and how we respond and how we allow these emotions to run our lives.
Right.
I see that a lot with people who have that victim space where they want to blame someone else and keep telling their story, and they did this to me, and
Hmm.
it's real and it's very prevalent in the space you're in. Before you start owning, I invited that person in to have that experience with, so I could overcome these emotions, and turning it back into your experience and your story, and only being able to do what you can about your side of it. and that can change your whole reality. And what they're doing is irrelevant at this point. It doesn't matter. Likely, I actually have a quick story that's kind of cool. I had a difficult relationship when I was in my early 20s, and I'd have dreams that this guy was yelling at me in my dreams, very abusive, and I'd wake up like in a panic, like I'd feel it. And this was for 10 years after that relationship ended, and I was like, what the heck? And it was probably about when I started exploring, like, how do I fix my own side of this? And I just got a real clear message, like, well, tell him you love him. And I'm like, well, I don't love him. I'm mad at him, like, like,
Yeah.
so in my dream, I went to sleep. I'm like, if he shows up, I'm just going to tell him I love him and thank you for the experience and let that go. And he did show up, and he was over there and he was coming at me, and I had looked at him directly and I said, I love you. And he stopped. And I said, I understand this isn't necessary. We don't have to keep doing this. And I love you. And it kept him at bay. And then when I woke up, there was no emotion. Like, I did this in my dream. but
Oh, wow.
but
That's
it was
great.
it was so prevalent, like it happened so often in my dream, that I was able to be like, look, you don't have my power anymore. And and on the flip side of that, whatever he was doing in his life in that moment, he wasn't thinking about me. He wasn't like intentionally coming in my dreams to haunt me. Like, this is my own emotion that was showing up. So
That's right.
it's fascinating. There are so many tools. So thank you, Jim, for sharing, and all the links to all the things in your website. He's got YouTube videos to explain this. Jim's one of my favorite people. He's definitely my family. So I'd love for you to be able to help more people meet your goal, make a difference. You already are. And thank you so much for being here. All the links are there. His book's on Amazon, this beautiful situation. So thank you so much for sharing. And I hope lots of people find you and you can continue to help more and more people.
I will. And I thank you for having me on. I appreciate it very much. This has been extremely enjoyable. Thaddeus, I'm glad you were here.
I was a witness.
Yeah, yeah, there you go. You were a witness. I appreciate that. Yeah. We didn't give you much space to talk, but it's good to have you there. I appreciate it very much.
Sometimes he gets in like a little happy zone where he's just, taking in all the good juju and
yeah, enjoying the cookies.
Enjoying the cookies.
Yeah. There you go.
Yeah.
Thank you, Andrea. Andrea, I appreciate being on here. I really do.
Absolutely.
I love talking about this stuff.
Yeah, I love how lit up you are about it. So everybody find Jim. We'll see you guys next time.
All right. Bye-bye.